Hello and welcome. This is a Mind of a Man podcast, and I'm your host, Viljami. And today we have a special episode in English because our guest here today is Barry Krost from US. So, welcome, Barry.
Thanks for having me.
So, Barry Krost is a family constellation facilitator and a trainer, and lots of other things as well. And I'm currently in his training, and we have this little mentoring going on as well. And before we go deeper into your work and my work, could you give us an introduction? So, who are you and what do you do?
I've been doing some kind of bodywork or healing for almost 40 years. I started off as a massage therapist, and I evolved into doing a work called orthobionomy, which is a really interesting osteopathic technique. And then from there, I moved into family constellations. And I've been doing family constellations since about 2003. I have a practice here in Chicago, Illinois. I have people who I do live in my office, where I do some of it, all of it together, and then I work online. And I'm really enjoying the work I'm doing these days. It all sort of seems like it's all in a spectrum. And I can see how it all comes together. Also, I have a background in anthropology and social science. I have a teaching degree in social studies here in the United States, so I taught basically social science in the past. So I have a certain kind of interest. Some of it comes from being a Holocaust survivor child. My father and my grandparents were in the Holocaust, and I got raised in a family where they actually talked about it quite a bit. So I always had a lot of questions about the world, perpetrators and victims. And I had lots of questions like, how does this happen? And I grew up during the 60s and 70s. So it was like, what could I do about it? So there's always a feeling of, we've got to do something. So I really went into anthropology thinking that maybe there was something I could do for the world. But first I knew I needed to understand, why does this stuff happen? So I studied communes. I thought maybe that would be a model. I studied all kinds of utopian models, and I looked at all kinds of different ways of thinking about how the world could be different, as well as, why do things happen? So this has been an interest a long time. And then I eventually got into body work and energy healing. And so when I look back now, I'm 63, I look back, I can see that I had these questions and ideas from maybe age 13, and I've spent like a lifetime really finding different ways of answering it. It's like I've been spiraling around looking at these answers, and also looking to do something positive about it. And it feels like it's a theme. It's like a thread through my life. I didn't necessarily know it while I was going through it, but now I can see that there was this thread. And I think now at 63, it feels like this thread has kind of come together. Now I can claim it and own it and see why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm really enjoying it now, more than maybe I did in the past, where it felt like a long climb up to the mountain. Now it feels like I'm at a good place with it.
So, how did you end up doing family constellations? Was it for you just for an interest or self-healing, or what was the impulse for doing family constellations for you?
Yeah, because of the Holocaust being a part of my family life, and then there's trauma before that, and trauma on the other side. I was a pretty traumatized kid in a lot of ways when I look back now. So I had a lot of anxiety and panic. I had a lot of issues, a lot of circular thinking, and I did a lot of psychotherapy, and it helped. But it always felt like psychotherapy only got so far. I always felt like there was a level of issues that I had that weren't accessed, and I also felt like a lot of what I did wasn't really mine. I had this really feeling like this is not me. Like and we talk in psychotherapy, we talk about stuff, it's just like they're not really getting to what's there, because it's not really me. And I felt like almost like I was inhabited by some old thoughts, ghosts. I mean, it wasn't very supernatural, but I felt like there was something in me that didn't belong. And so when I read the first description of family constellations, I moved to Texas, and I went to an open house, and I saw the flyer, and I looked at it and went, wow, that's really interesting. And I was really open to trying things anyways. So I went into this thing, and it was just amazing to me what we saw, the whole process. And I had a constellation done that weekend, and the facilitator, Scott Bader, who was really good facilitator, he laid out Holocaust constellation for me, and I actually felt relief after it. It felt like it was, wow, somebody's finally getting to this thing that like it's like hanging over me. And I felt like I was a little less burdened. I didn't get rid of all of it, but I felt less burdened. And I also enjoyed the process of it. So I started taking workshops partly for me and partly just to be in service to others. And it felt like, wow, this is an interesting model. And then I kept going and going and going.
And then you somehow wanted to be a facilitator. What was the?
Scott offered I was just taking workshops for me. I even though I had my other practices, the constellation stuff was like a hot, like something I did. I wasn't, it seemed really hard. Like Scott was very good at it. I thought, oh, I can't, I didn't think I could do it. It's like, it seemed really like, wow, to be able to hold that space. I didn't know that I could do that. So I was kind of intimidated by the idea of being a facilitator. But then Scott offered a A3D weekend workshop in 2008. And I just thought the idea of doing A3D weekends would be a deep dive, because I thought, wow, representing and facilitating and learning more about the work. And it was set up as a facilitator training, but not everybody necessarily was thinking about it that way. So there was 13 of us in San Diego. It was amazing. But we didn't really, I didn't feel like I could really do any facilitating at the end of that. So then I did a second facilitator training with Susie Tucker, who in English has written, she's the editor of all of Hellinger's books in English. So she really knew how to talk about the work and the concepts, and really brought Bert Hellinger into the conversation really well. So after that, I felt more confident in facilitating. And also that's when I really started reading and watching video and really learning about Bert Hellinger. I didn't know much about him before that. So then I really took a deep dive. And then when I really had read the literature better and really understood the concepts, I could take what Scott and Susie had demonstrated and begin to integrate it into a practice. I had a checklist at that point when I started off like 35 things that you have to do. So I had this checklist I developed from all the things I'd done. So I'd start a workshop and I had this checklist. I'd study it beforehand, and it was very complicated. And then I started doing it and became more confident as I went along, and took more training. I did quite a bit of training between 2014 and 2019, quite a bit, just to really fill it out and really develop a style. And now I feel like I kind of have my way of doing it that I'm still developing, but it feels good, and I feel like I'm doing pretty well with it. And the work itself is being my teacher now, so I'm not doing so much training now.
And now you started doing your own training. What was the thought behind that, or why did you do it?
I've been very resistant to doing training myself, to be a trainer, because I didn't. The two trainings that I did were good in a lot of ways, but they were flawed, and they really didn't provide me with enough practice. Excuse me. So I just looked around, and I didn't think any of the trainings were what I would do. I've been training massage therapists and body workers since 1982. So I am a trainer. So and massage training I do here is this really long program. It's 630 hours. So for me, training was very involved, and people here in the US, the training they wanted to do was not very involved. It's like a very short thing. So I wasn't interested in just doing a training that was small. And I also didn't know whether there was people interested in doing the longer training so I had an idea what I wanted to do in a certain way, and I just didn't think anybody would do it, because here in the US, they're always going to do the shortcut. Like, let's get a 50-hour program and a 150-hour program. They're going to choose a 50-hour program. That's just how Americans are here. They just don't want to do the long thing. And I wasn't interested in doing anything not serious. And then I started having more students and participants around so I had some people who were mentoring with me and taking some little pieces. And I started realizing, well, there are some people around. And then one night I had a kind of a flash insight from the field, from wherever, that just sort of laid out a version of my ideas that was much more whole and holistic. And I thought, and also it could be done online. That was probably the big thing, is if I do it, the program online, I can have the whole world is there, and I can find the students, or they can find me, who really are serious. We're here. If it was just the US, I don't know that I could do it. So I just had this vision of it all laid out one night, and then I had this idea of a virtual mentoring group. So I think the internet probably really, I'd say that's probably I needed the internet to do it, because I really didn't think there was enough people here in the US just by itself that would be interested in working with me, or that I could reach here locally. So I laid it all out, and I added a code of ethics, and I put it out there, and I've got 10 people enrolled in my training, and I've got about 18 people enrolled in this virtual mentoring group. So the people are there, and we kind of found each other. And so I had all these ideas for a while, but it's like all of a sudden it coalesced. It was the right time, I guess. And I feel really good about the training that showed up. And I'm very happy with the trainees, the people who want to train, who are showing up. It seems really good.
Yeah, for me, it was also the internet saved me from, I don't know from what, but COVID started. I didn't have anything to do. I wanted to do family constellation in Finland. It wasn't possible. And then I saw your workshop, and I just, okay, well, I will go and I will try these different trainers. And it worked. It works surprisingly well. And I liked your style. And then some time passed, and this situation just continued. And I was thinking that maybe I would like to go in a new training as well, because I felt that my first training was just a scratching of the surface, and I wanted to dive in deeper. And I was thinking, I hope somebody does some proper online training. And then 1 week after that, you sent it the message that, well, I have one. And I thought, okay, well.
So it must be you, man.
Yeah, maybe it was me, but it was like perfect. It went like perfect. But anyway, before we go deeper into the family constellation, so my name of this podcast is Mind of a Man, and it started as my own, let's say, journey as what is to be a man. And I have been thinking about that for, let's say, 5 to 6 years, really deeply, that what is that I am a man? What does it mean to me? So I would like to ask you, what does it mean to you to be a man?
That's a great question. One of the lovely things that's happened with Family Constellations is I was doing some work on this topic, and some ancestral energy showed up that I call the strength of men. And I've been working with that energy now for a couple of years, and it really confirmed some thoughts I had, but it gave me an experience of an ancient ancestor of mine who is a man, a real man, or men. And it really has helped me to follow the path better now. So when I connect with this energy, the strength of men, they know who they are. They are fully individuated from their family systems. They are not afraid of death. They're not in a hurry to die. They're not afraid of death. And they know that their function in life is to sacrifice themselves for the family. That the main biological job of man is to protect the family at his own cost of his life. And a lot of the aggression and violence that we have as men is connected to protection. If somebody's going to try to harm my family, I'm going to protect them. And so that's the key thing I really recognize in myself now. In my body, in my cells, in my biology, I am designed biologically to protect the family, the village, my children, my wife. That's like my number one thing. And my potential for violence is that. And when I'm tuned into it, now my violence has purpose and my aggression has purpose. And it's very calm and cool and easy now. And it was getting there anyways. Also, the strength of men teaches me that man treats his partner as an equal. And when the man protects the woman relaxes and is calm. And then the woman nurtures the man and gives the man a reason to die, a reason to live. And that's really good. So it's I just got married again, and it's very interesting to use that energy in my new marriage. So it's just this energy of the man that I feel is strong and quieter. It's not a female version of man that we seem to be asked to do here in the United States, maybe the world. It's a different kind of feeling. To me, the strength of men, when I tune it, we're one with nature, and we're comfortable with death and life and the world, and we're at ease. It's an easiness that man has. And I started working with Shiva, the god Shiva, and Shiva shows up for me, and it's a lot of fun. He's very playful in a very man way. Sometimes it's boyish, sometimes very physical. We wrestle a lot. We toss around each other. So we play with the aggression, we play with the violence, but it's just play. And that's really the strength of men. This energy has really taught me a lot. And I've been moving in that direction. Some years ago, I bought myself this giant spear, and I used to hold the spear because I had a theory in my head that men are biologically needing an object, a tool, a weapon, that we were designed to hold something. So I got this spear, and I would just hold it and tune into my inner violence, my inner capacity to be, aggressive. This is before I discovered the strength of men energy. And I would just hold the spear and just meditate with it, standing with it. And it felt so good to have the spear. And I was already moving in this direction of this calm easiness with my potential for violence and my potential to protect. I didn't quite have it articulated until more recently, but I would just hold the spear very frequently, and it felt really good. I did this for a couple of years on a regular basis. I'd hold the spear and just be in tune with holding the spear and listen to my body, listen to my energy as man. And so I was doing that for quite a while. And then doing constellations, I discovered this ancestral energy, which confirmed and expanded my sense of man. And now when I read stuff or I look around, it feels to me like this ancestral energy is really on target. It gives me, and I think maybe that's what's missing for us is in the past, and indigenous people had this ongoing connection with the strength of men, and we lost it. So it doesn't give it to us, but it kind of informs us about and reminds us and allows us to feel man. And if you don't feel that energy, it's harder to get it. So you have to find some way, because it's a feeling. It's not a thought. And it's very much in our bodies.
So if you said that it's very much in our bodies, I would like to ask you about that. You are a body worker. You have been touching bodies, and I don't know. Do you know this term called somanaut? It's kind of that you are exploring how does it feel to be inside your own body, and you can do it with the sport or a yoga or whatever. Mm-hmm. Just explore the phenomenological sense of how does it feel to be in my body, and for me, I cannot separate that from my manliness. That there's kind of this link there, because I'm in my body, and I have testicles, I have a dick, I have a male's body, and when I have founded my, let's say, root back to my physical body, it gives me so much strength and aliveness, and I can feel that there is this quality of being a man, being a biological man. So can you talk about that? What does this sound to you?
Well, what you're talking about is going to be a chemistry thing, just in terms of the testosterone we have. So our chemistry is the chemistry of man. My morphology, my bones, my structure is the structure of man. And our bones determine a lot of our feelings. And my fascia is man. So I am in the shape of man. I am man. So like the whole body, this is a biological human man. And it's not a human, and it's not a female straight shape. I have a different pelvis. Our pelvises are shaped differently than women. So we're biologically different than women. So my biology says this is man. And if I try to act like a woman, it's just not so helpful. So I think if you really tune into the nerves and the tissues, everything in here says man. And I think it's cellular too. I don't think it's just the tissues. I think in our cells, like whatever the intelligence. So there's some kind of intelligence that runs all this. I'm not running my cells. I'm not running my heart. I don't run any of it. Something runs me, makes sure all this happens. Whatever that intelligence is in me, it's a man intelligence. And my wife has a female intelligence, and her female intelligence has a cycle every month, and she's meant to make babies, and she has a different biology. My biology is meant to throw myself at a bear and like strike him if I need to.
And well, in there is also this aspect of, if we go to family constellations from here, that accepting what is. So if I'm here now sitting, accepting my body how it is, I relax. It is how it is. I have like a little fat in my stomach. I would like it to be smaller, but it is how it is. And if I accept it, I can relax. And I think, well, the world is now, at least your country and your culture is going through this avalanche of lots of confusion about this topic. So, but for me, it's really weird that if I'm here wanting to be something else that I'm not, I feel pain. It's like a suffering if I want to be something else that I am.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I think a lot of, the people who came here to the US left because they couldn't live where they were, or they were failures of where they were. And so we got all the people who didn't quite fit in or didn't work or weren't allowed to be, and they all came to the same place. And so you got one country of people who are like misfits, right? Where the people who stayed behind either were more successful or more comfortable or more at easy, and all the people who couldn't figure out what to do, they all came here. It was not a good place to have everybody mixed in. So there is a sort of psychosis that sort of started from day one. We had a lot of people who with pain and suffering and trauma, and then they were kind of psychotic, and they all came here. So America's pretty psychotic. So I think it's some of it, and it's a physical thing. So you have people who are just in their biology very confused. And here in the U.S., a lot of men feel like they have to act like women, and they're allowing a lot of women energy into their body so they can be accepted. And that's just a killer. I mean, I do all I can to keep female energy and foreign energy out of my body. I don't let my wife's energy in my body. In this biology, there's only man energy. And if a lot of female energy starts coming in here, it makes my man energy really psychotic and crazy and not comfortable. So I keep female energy away. And then the thing about, I think Americans don't want to accept what is, because what is before is not so good. So they always want to think what would be. They're always thinking about what would be to avoid thinking about what was, but then they're never really here. So I think a lot of American culture, they're not present. So I think what you're talking about is being present. We can only be really fully ourselves in the present. And we can only be in touch with the energies of the world and the universe and the earth when we're present. So if you don't like your fat belly, and I've got one too, you're not really present. So I'll think about the diet I'm going to be on, or I'm going to think about some other thing instead of being present to my fat belly. But if I'm really present to my fat belly, it's likely not to get too fat because I'm pretty calm. But if I start worrying about all these things in the future, my belly's going to get fatter. So I don't think people in the US are very present. And it's dangerous not to be present, because wisdom is in the present. So there's a certain missing wisdom here. There's a certain way that we don't connect here, really. It's always about what will be. And then there's a trying to forget what happened. So that's really deadly. So it's, in some ways, I feel more comfortable in Europe.
We have also our problem. We have our problems.
No, I know. You have everybody does, but I feel more comfortable with Europeans in Europe in some ways, because I think it's a little less, feels to me like Europeans are more present. Not perfect, but more present to who they are. At least that's been my experience so far. I don't live in Europe, but I've been traveling to Europe for Constellations for some years, and I felt much more at home with people who are present. So not so much Europe, but people who are present, who are really here, and you're encountering people who are really here. It was really delightful to me.
Yeah. So we are already talking about family constellation and stuff, but I would like you, Tadu, I would like to go a little bit backwards and ask you to tell us what it is. What is family constellation? It's so hard to describe it, and it's so there's lots of people telling this and that about family constellations. So I would like to hear from you. What do you see? What is family constellations?
Well, it's a process that allows us to connect with what has happened in our family system, and also to show us how we are members of a family system. So In this work, we believe and see that we are born into a family system, and there's certain things that are happening in that system, good and bad. And there's often in our family systems issues and things that haven't been resolved. And children who are born into systems with issues that haven't been resolved tend to take on the issues that are not resolved. We call that entanglement, or I've been using the word lately, merging. So we tend to merge with whatever dysfunctions or psychoses happen in the family we're born into. And then we go through life merged with things that really are not our own, and it creates all kinds of physical, mental, and psychological dysfunctions. And so a lot of times we have problems, and it's not our problem. We're arguing an argument that happened in the past, or we have physical symptoms. Many physical symptoms that don't respond to treatment are something that's happened in the family over time. So, here, especially here in the United States, we think we're individuals, but we're really not. We're members of the system. And we're meant to live in that system. When we become adults, we're meant to be connected, but separate from the system. Like we're part of it, but we're not meant to be merged with it. We're meant to be connected to it. But what happens is if you don't really individuate, you get stuck in the system, you're merged with it. So most of the people we deal with in family constellations are in some way merged with their system in a way that they're not conscious of, and it's causing a lot of their problems. And so in family constellations, we're trying to see what happens so we can actually help them see and release the issue, honor the issue in a certain way, but really individuate from it, separate from the issue, so that the person can lead their own life and be connected to the system, but not merged with it. So that seems to be constellations these days, is how to unmerge people from their system in a way that's really not helpful, and how to get them to use the system as a resource. And we do this through there's some kind of energy we call it the knowing field. So we have a field of energy. We can connect with these, we can read the system, we can look at it and see what's there. We can feel it, we can see image from it. We can set up people to represent those things in a group, and they'll actually speak as if they're in that system. And so we can sort of see what happened and what's out of order and find a way to order it. The founder of the work, Bert Hellinger, actually came up with kind of these natural laws of the family called the orders of love. And in family constellations, if we really pay attention to the orders, we can look at a system and say, they're out of order because they're not honoring and being aware of these natural laws. And if we can sort of figure out how to get them back to following those natural laws, the system relaxes, becomes more present, becomes more at ease. The client, who's everything here, relaxes, is more present, more at ease, more themselves, and they begin to see what they were merged with as separate from them. So rather than being merged with their grandfather, now they see the grandfather as different. And then also they're in relationship with the grandfather. When they were merged, they weren't really in relationship with him. Now they're in a relationship with the grandfather, even though he's dead, at least with his essence. And now there's a real possibility for love because they're in relationship. So there's a restoration of relationship. There's a restoration of energy flowing. There's a restoration of use of our families being resources, not sources of trauma. And I think it's a way to help us to evolve and grow and become men. And well, that's a start.
So you talk about orders of love, and I've been following the family constellation, let's say, field of facilitators, and it's a wild west out there. Lots of different stuff, and people are it is a kind of good thing. People are exploring different types of ways of doing this work and applying different kind of other methods and other philosophies. So could you talk about the importance of the basic orders of love, that why we have to ground our work to that?
Yeah, the orders of love are like gravity or centrifugal force. They just are. And they're acknowledging what is, and they really are these certain things that are there. And I totally think they exist. And so you can't just come in here and put some shamanism in, or put some other system in here and just think it's going to heal a family system. The way you can heal a family system is through the orders of love. So you need to know them. And if you're not using the orders of love, I would say you're not doing family constellations, because when Hellinger developed it, that's the key thing we're using to determine what is wrong, what is disordered, and then what is needing to be resolved. So if you're not using the orders of love, it's not family constellations, I don't think. And I don't think it's very helpful if you really want to work with a system. The orders of love are an amazing way to help a family system. If you want to work with a different system or work with some other dimension of human reality, other things are great. Shamanism's great. But shamanism isn't a great thing for family systemic dynamics. It doesn't really help there. It's not made for that. It doesn't really see that, doesn't really resolve it. So the orders of love are these natural laws in a family. And the first law is that everybody in the system belongs. And so if somebody's excluded in some way, they must be given a place, or the system just doesn't function. Everybody belongs. So you've got to figure out a way to allow that person to be there. Parents precede children. So parents have to be allowed to be first and bigger. Also, the balance between a child and a parent is always unequal. You can't be bigger than your parents and give them anything, really. It's all a one-way thing. So if your parental relationship is damaged, you're going to have a problem in life. If you think you're bigger than your parents, and then you're going to have problems in your own relations. And if you are always allowing someone to be bigger than you, you're going to have problems. Because if, like with my wife, she's not bigger or smaller than me, we're equal. So if I treat my wife like she's bigger than me, we're not going to have a good marriage. And if I'm bigger than her, we're not going to have a marriage. So we have to be the same. So if we follow the orders of love, we can really determine what is what is wrong with the family system pretty quickly and easily, and then come up with an intervention that's really helpful. So I think the orders of love are like a really wonderful thing that Bert Hellinger gave us. And I think if we follow it, we really can be very helpful. I think some of it is that people are just not willing to read the very difficult book that has the information in it. So Bert Hellinger wrote a book called Love, Sin, and Symmetry. It's hard to read. So you can read it a couple times like I have and get it, or you can not read it and bring in shamanism or mediumship or the fairies or something else to replace it because you didn't bother to read the book. I think anybody who's read Love, Sin, and Symmetry and really gotten it is going to be pretty committed to using the orders of love in service to the client and the family system.
So what do you think? Is it still okay if you use, if you are really grounded in these orders of love, then build up and take other modalities and mix them? And
yeah.
how would you kind of mediate that? And what's the good way of doing that? Because people are doing that anyways.
I think you've got to see whether or not, if you're going to do something from another system, is it helping you to see the disorder using the orders? Does it help you to use the order of loves, or does it replace them? And I think what I'm seeing is people are replacing. I actually think people doing most of the mixing don't actually know the orders of love. So that I think you have to, there's that. But when I use other things, I just make sure that they work with the orders of love. So I use the orders of love in my body work, all my bodywork techniques. If I'm going to do something shamanistic, I'm going to see whether or not my shamanism works as a collaborator. So they have to collaborate with the orders of love. They can't displace it. And what I usually see is people are displacing the orders of love, but I don't think it's a problem bringing other things in, though I don't know why they should, because to me, family constellations is an amazing model. There really isn't a big need to bring in other things. I mean, certainly personal style stuff, but I don't really see the need to bring in lots of other stuff. If you want to bring drumming in, so a lot of people want to bring in drums and things like that. That doesn't really affect the model if you bring in drums, or if you add other objects and rituals. I don't think that's an issue. But if you bring a different paradigm in, how does that paradigm work with the paradigm of family constellations? And you have to be pretty thoughtful to take two paradigms that don't really work and put them together. I mean, that aren't really, they're different, and put them together and expect them to work. And that's what I see people doing, is they're not thinking about it. So when I bring something in to family constellations is my dominant model when I'm doing family constellations. Anything else has to work well with the family constellations. I'm not changing paradigms. I might bring in different techniques, but all the techniques are in service to the family constellation paradigm or the theory. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And for me personally, I don't understand what happens with those people who do like, well, let's say 5 weekends of workshops and then start facilitating and calling themselves facilitators, because I have done like 2 years, 3 years of family constellation work, and I still feel that I don't know anything about it. Well, maybe, okay, I do know something about it, but I see that the field is so vast, and the layers of understanding, they are like, I'm peeling myself and peeling this understanding like an onion, layer by layer by layer, and there's a lot of things to understand and to go through yourself and to learn how to facilitate. And when you have that knowledge and expertise after years of training and doing your own self-developmental work, then you can add some other stuff and then start working with some other modalities if you know them, and then you can do it. But I think the problem is that you don't have, lots of people don't have a good foundation on the family constellation, and then they add something to that, and then they get mixed up.
Yeah, if you don't have a firm idea of the paradigm, and you haven't really know the orders of love and how to see them. So you can know they're there, but you have to be able to step in the constellation and see them. And it takes practice to notice how the orders of love are showing up. So somebody presents you an issue, how are the order of love? So that takes a while. And then you can start experimenting and doing stuff. And I'm playing around with my format. So it's not that I'm against that. I just think that everything has to be in service to the orders of love. That can't, to me, the orders of love are the one thing that cannot be tossed out. And I think that you think about Picasso, he didn't start off with cubism. He started off being able to draw a bowl of fruit really well. And you can see in his work, he has mastery over the paint. And you see somebody else who's, I used to go to student shows at the Art Institute here in Chicago, and you see somebody who's a student trying to do something like Picasso. And you could tell it wasn't, they weren't really mastering what it was. It didn't have, they were like imitating Picasso, but they didn't really, there's something was missing. And some of that was the experience of really knowing the paint really well. You can't do there's no shortcut in knowing your medium to notice what is. So in family constellations, there isn't a shortcut to knowing the orders of love, to knowing the philosophy, to having looked at a lot of cases. There's no shortcuts. If you take a shortcut, then you're sort of lost, and you're going to grab whatever you already know previously. So if you've done some shamanism or some other things and you're lost with your constellations, you'll just automatically grab whatever's there. To me, learning the orders of love, it's some years before you're going to understand the orders of love. And for me, you have to read a lot of literature. People don't read enough. So I think if you read a lot and watched a lot of, I think in a couple of years, you can prepare somebody to be an excellent therapist in family constellations, but they have to do the work. And just because it's alternative doesn't mean no work. This is where I think a lot of people think because they have some access to the divine or something that they can do a shortcut and avoid the hard work. That's just not been. Shamans of the past did a lot of, they spent years being apprenticed to the master. I mean, throughout human history, all of these healing arts were quite skillfully inculcated into the student. The student had to train and train and train. But now we have this sort of fast food idea of training here, especially in the United States. Is you take 8 weekends, you're ready to go. Or the big thing is Reiki master. I think Reiki is really cool, but after 2 weekends, you're not a Reiki master. That's just like you're plugged into the energy, lovely energy, and then people are putting out their shingle. I'm a Reiki master after 2 weekends, and I didn't even really learned anything. I just was plugged into the energy and shown the symbols. And then they're a master. And in the United States, they love that here because then they're a master. So I think people don't want to put in the time. To me, family constellations it's the kind of work where if you're serious about it, you want to be well prepared to do a serious work like this. It's like playing the cello or something. You want to train to play really well if you really are serious about it. And I think you have to put in the time. And maybe it's 2 or 3 years, but for a lot of people, 2 or 3 years seems like a long time. And I think for me, it's more like 10 years.
So
If you
you
tell
talk.
most people, go ahead.
So you talk about doing the work. So I would like to ask to clarify two things here. One is to learning to how to facilitate, learning the orders of love, or learning how to read the field, how to read people, how to hold the space, and all this other stuff. But then there's the other side of that, doing the work on yourself. So can you talk about that? Because for me personally, I started doing family constellations because, well, it for me it was so amazing way of doing my own individuation work to help me to find myself and be more grounded and all this other thing. It's like for me, like in the top three of what, if you want to seriously some self growth, you can do family, lots of family constellation work without being a facilitator. Just go and do it. So can you talk about importance of doing your own work and your own individuation?
Well, individuation is the key word. Is I haven't run into anything that does a better job of helping us to individuate. And to me, most of us who have issues of any sort are based on being merged in some way with our parents or the system or particular members of the system. I think that is the epidemic here, is a world merged with psychotic, pathological, grief, innocence, crazy stuff. So family constellations as a client really helps you to learn how to not even learn, how to experience letting go of your family, letting go of what is entangled, recognizing that you're entangled. So that was for me the big thing, is once I realized it was about entanglements, I don't know how many I've had 30 constellations done for me. So I've done a lot of work myself. I see a psychotherapist who helps me with similar things. So I've sought out practitioners to help me to individuate. To me, that's been my entire, if you want to say what's the personal through line of my life, is how to individuate. In my case, I wanted to individuate away from the Holocaust. I wanted to separate myself from the darkness of all of that crazy stuff and be a self who didn't have to be afraid. And so to me, constellations, it allows you to see self and not self, which is the key to our immune system. Our immune system is entirely designed self and not self. We're so designed to self, to this is me, this is not me. But constellations show us that, man, we have really failed at that. We're so, because of these big brains and human history, we're so unable to determine many of the time, much of the time, what's me and what's not me. And so most of us are merged in some way with issues that happened a long time ago, and we don't know it. Now we're walking around thinking, this is me. It feels really weird being me. But then constellations say, no, that's not you. That's your grandfather. And this feeling you have over here, this pain you have, that is the person who killed himself on your mother's side. And this spinny pattern you have in your head that confuses you whenever you're in a relationship, that has to do with your mother and her mother and her mother, because there was an aborted fetus that was hidden. And these feelings of maybe rage that you have, you learn that's not my rage, that I'm somebody in my family killed somebody and they hid it. Or this crazy thoughts I have, this psychosis I have, that's because there's some schizophrenia running through my family. So you start to see what is you and what is not you, and you start to see those things as separate from you. And I don't know another technique that can really separate you from what you're entangled with, as well as family constellations using the orders of love. And I think that has been the most healthy thing I've done in my life, is to start to individuate, not from a whole thing, but from many things, and the whole system too. And then also Hellinger has this idea of give and take, of how we interact with each other. And we really don't know how to have a healthy give and take with another person if we're merged with everybody. You can't have give and take. So even with your mother, when you're merged with your mother, there's no give and take. When I separate from my mother, now I can give just as a child to my mother and take from my mother as a child. And then with my wife, I can give and I can take. And that can't happen if we're merged. And I don't know of another technique that's done a better job for me and my clients than constellations have done, in terms of really teaching us the truth and the value of individuating, and then how to do it. Otherwise it's just a concept, individuation. How do I do that? You have to figure out where you're merged in the system and begin to find a way to see it and understand it so you can let go of it. And then you have to sometimes be brave enough to let go. Sometimes it's hard to let go of those things. So I think Constellation does an amazing job at individuating.
And well, how about this? That when what I have seen, I've been involved in different places where they do family constellations, and I was in this one. I'm not going to say the name of the place, but in this place that it kind of that you do family constellation work, and when then you individuate out from your family, and then you join the cult of family constellation, kind of like. And I said in my Finnish podcasting, we did a podcast with my teacher, and I said that family constellations are not your family. And I mean that those guys who you do the family constellations with, or the association you are involved, or the religious cult or whatever is, that's not your family. Like I did lots of people doing family constellation and then just jumping into a next kind of place where it's kind of substitute for your real family. And then, well, it happens a lot. So
yeah, well, that's that big small thing again. So if you're merged in a certain way with your system where somebody's got to be bigger and you're smaller, you're always looking for somebody bigger than you to be a substitute for your parents. If you fully take life from your parents, then you no longer need the bigger person, right? So I take life from my parents. Now I'm free to live as a human being, where in my life, everything's going to be equal unless I have children, and then they're going to be smaller than me. But if you haven't fully separated from your parents, you're still oriented towards something having bigger than you. So you can do a constellation and free yourself by some things, but then you're looking for somebody else to take the place of the big thing. What's that big thing? And so a cult is basically just super parent. And I think if you have some parts of you that are maybe some of the wound that you have is precognitive, so it happened to you in the womb or as a child, you have these precognitive feelings of needing to have some bigger thing that keeps you safe. I don't know what it is, but I need some bigger thing to keep me safe. I'm still merged with this idea of a bigger thing must keep me safe. So I spend my life looking for a bigger thing that keeps me safe. And I do constellations, but I'm still looking for a bigger thing that keeps me safe. A guru, or maybe the spirit and God. I think that's part of what's going on in constellations. Is even Bert Hellinger at the end was looking for some big thing to sort of, this the big thing, and we're sort of like not, non-cognitive babies. And so I think that's what's going on, is if they really have done healthy family constellations, they naturally want equal relationships. Someone who's done a really successful job with family constellations and has really individuated requires and needs and provides equal relationship. They don't do that. They can't. If they really let go of their parent, they no longer really know how to take and give from something bigger. They've already done it. They let go. They had their time with their parents. They've let go. They received life. Now, as an adult, individuated, all the relationships are like this, or unless you have children, in that case, they're smaller. But that would be a good indicator that you've really individuated from your parents. Is you no longer have any need in your body or your mind, your spirit, for something bigger than you to keep you safe. You only want equal relationships or smaller ones with your children. That'd be a pretty good indicator that the natural orders of love are working for you and that you're really individuated. If you're still wanting that big thing, I think you're still merged. That would be my guess. And
so that we can say maybe that doing family constellation is not a guarantee of anything. So no. It's kind of, you can do lots of constellations, but still like refuse to grow or refuse to stand alone or kind of be yourself.
Yeah. You could do 500,000 constellations and still be merged with your family if you haven't really let go. But once again, I'd wonder if the facilitator in those situations are really aware of the orders of love, really aware of what entanglement is emerging. Are the facilitators in those situations looking where people are merged? Of course, if they want to be a guru, I mean, if you've got somebody who wants to be a guru, they're actually doing family constellations so that people will separate from their families and replace them with them. So if there's a constellation person that wants to be a guru, then they don't want people to separate. They want people just to transfer their needs to them. I don't want to be a guru. I mean, I'm the last person who wants to be a guru. I refuse to let people put me on a pedestal. I have zero interest in being the guru. So I don't let myself go there. I don't let people really do that with me. I'm very human all the time, and I'm very intentionally very human all the time. And to me, I'm trying very hard with my people I'm working with as a trainee or my clients that we're equal. Even when I'm in my office, when a person comes in for a bodywork session, I make sure my chair is the same height as theirs. I worked for a chiropractor who always wanted to sit up on the desk so he could look down at the client, which means he's the daddy looking down at the client. He loved that, and he thought that gave him power. I don't want that power. I'm not interested in power. So I am always either equal, or if I have to make a choice, I'll make my chair a little smaller than my client. But I always sit equal or smaller to my client, never bigger. And the same thing with Zoom or anything I do, I am the same or smaller. And that is a healthy way to be a facilitator. It's a healthy learning from family constellations. And I think that's the orders of love teach us. I think that's, once again, the orders of love are very, very smart about how to be in relationships. That's why I just so big on people learning about them. I just think they're so good, and they are what is. They are what is, whether people want to like it or not. They are what is, and they're not restrictive. They're not limiting. They're just very fundamental laws. If you follow them, allows us to have love and dignity and strength. And I don't know another healing art that does a better job than that for those particular issues and systems and families.
So how about the healing? Like you do first different kind of healing, and family constellation, I hesitate to call it healing because in the word healing, I fear that there is this trap, and I think it's the trap that most of the people who start doing healing, they have to kind of have the battle with the savior syndrome, that I am the great healer. So Can you a little bit talk about that? Because that happens so often when you start noticing some results or whatever healing modality you are using, and family constellation is one of them.
Well, I've been involved in something called orthobonomy, and we always very strongly say the client heals. We just facilitate their healing. And we talk about spontaneous healing. We talk about self-correction. So my idea, when I use the word healing, and it's hard to maybe keep everybody in my definition, healing means the client does the healing, their body does the healing. I'm merely showing their body how to do it if it's missing the understanding, or I'm supporting their healing, but they do the healing. I am not doing the healing. Maybe I'm the healer, but they're doing the healing. So I don't use the word healer for myself too much, but I use the word healing, but I mean they heal, and I support their healing. Their body, their energy knows how to heal. And if we follow the orders of love, it's spontaneous. In a constellation, when we finally show somebody what really is true, it's sometimes very spontaneous what happens. It just happens. So for me, I love the word healing, because to me it means the client has the power to repair and heal themselves if they're given help. But it's a funny word, though. It gets used because a lot of people want to be the healer. Once again, they're making themselves the big one, and then you can't heal anybody if you're trying to be the healing from a big place isn't going to be very effective. It's not going to really help people let go. You're just going to and that may be what's happening in these constellations where people are following the guru. They're being healed by the guru, and so they don't really individuate. They just move it around. It's like moving the furniture around instead of really doing it. But in terms of orthobonomy, I've had 27 years of experiencing how the body heals itself, long before I encountered constellations. And I can feel it with my hands. I have my hands on people and I feel the body changing. I can see the results on the table. People self-heal. They can't heal everything themselves. If I'm in a car accident, I need surgery. But many of the things that are problematic are self-correcting. And that's what I mean by healing. So I'm comfortable with it from that perspective.
And if I take a little bit off topic, I see that all the things that happened with Bert Hellinger and the changing of the name and doing this, and then this evolved, the family constellation work evolved so many times, and it had these cracks. So kind of, I think that was a service for other people, because people couldn't like follow Bert Hellinger as a guru, because if you wanted to do something else, you kind of had to individuate it. Okay, I will take this part of the work and use that, and then I'm standing alone. And because he did a lot of stuff, and then Sophie continued his work, it's kind of, I think that's a service for other people, that it's not like really coherent, the whole family constellation, like kind of the heritage.
Well, she wanted it to be a guru thing. So she shifted it when she came, especially around 2015, 2014, she was really, she would, Gunter Weber on a recent video talks about how he saw Sophie at a place in Mexico, grab Bert's hands and put him up in the air and goes, he is the one, he's the father, he's the guru. So she wanted it to be a guru thing. So the later work definitely has a, they have 800 people all dressed up in the same outfits, waving the same flags. So it did turn into a guru thing, but the early work, Bert Hellinger in the early days was not interested in being a guru. He didn't really even train people. So the early work wasn't developed by Bert Hellinger. He was only interested in doing what he's doing. And even if you went to his trainings, he wasn't that interested in you being a guru, but he also wasn't interested in really training you. It was really just himself. The work, you come there, you pay him, he does the work, he leaves. So he was never really that involved in training people and creating the thing. Sophie became more interested in turning it into a thing. If anything, Hellinger seemed to always get into conflict with people, collaborating with him in conflict with people. So he tended to not collect people. He tended to be, he would say things to people were a little harsh. And so he was sort of not a real guru kind of figure. But later on, she did a good job of making it more of a, when he was in his 90s, by then, late 80s to 90s, she had made him into a guru by then. But definitely the early days, a lot of those people who developed the work, they just picked it up themselves. They got together in Germany and they just would get together and practice and learn, and they sort of had to figure it out. There wasn't following Bert Hellinger. He just didn't allow it.
Okay, so then I will go back to the earlier topic about the healing. How do you know that you have done enough constellations yourself? What's I did ask this one time. Maybe I didn't ask that for you, but maybe in the group. That how do you know? When have you individuated enough?
I guess when you get there. I don't know. I think there are times when you want to get help, and there's times when you need to do your own work. And I always give homework, because I don't want to do the work for my clients. They still have to do the work. So if my clients are doing the homework that I give them, then they don't need a constellation as often. If they really are pursuing taking the lessons they get about the orders of love, and they take the lessons of a constellation and they work with it, they probably don't need as many constellations. But if they need help, they need help. So I'm 63. I've probably done 30 constellations for myself. I don't know that I'm done getting constellations, but I haven't gotten as many recently because I feel like I'm doing my work, and I don't really. I've learned the lessons of constellations. So constellations, the family constellation work has taught me a lot, and now I'm learning how, as an individuated self, I'm trying to take responsibility for myself. So maybe you need less constellations when you really finally individuate enough that you feel responsible for your own healing, and really continually have a regular practice of working on yourself, and you need less help. But I don't know that you would never need a constellation, but I don't need them as often. It's like at some point you take off the training wheels off the bike, but every once in a while you still need to take the bike in for some repairs. And so I think people who need to have some help getting enough individuated enough that they can easily take more responsible and start having it. You have to have, I think everybody needs some regular practice of healing themselves. And so I don't know, it's probably different for everybody, but there probably is a certain level of ease in the self that would mean you need less constellations. But I don't know that I'll ever not need constellations. I might need them less frequently as I get older. Maybe at some point I'm fully individuated and I don't need them anymore. I would say then, I could safely say if you're fully individuated, you don't need constellations probably anymore. They would not be useful. If you're fully individuated, no merging at all, I don't think you need constellations. I think you're done. I think the work has done its job if you reach that place. And so that's the goal for myself. I would like to be fully individuated, and I'd like to help everybody who wants to work with me, including my students and people training with me. I'd like everybody that I can to become fully individuated and not need a family constellation. It's like a secure attachment. I don't see anybody in my practice pretty much that has a secure attachment style. They pretty much have individuated from their, if you're really secure with your parents, they've pretty much individuated. So another way to look at it is how can constellations help you to have a secure attachment enough with your parents that you let them go? Because that's the real security, is you can actually say, Mom and Dad, thank you for life. Now I live my own life. Thank you. And they walk in your own life. So I think that's where attachment style comes in. I'm another way to think about it is I'm trying to get everybody, including myself, to have a secure attachment.
But how does it work? I do understand what you're saying, and in the start that you take the life from your parents and then you live your own life. But what about in your own life? Like for me, my parents live next door to me, and I'm every day with them because of my son and other stuff as well. And probably because they're getting old, I will probably help them more, and they help with the kids, and it's kind of the family is alive there at the same time. So in the start, you said being connected and also separate at the same time. So can you describe this place where you are connected and separate at the same time, that you can live your life as well? You don't have to kind of go away from your parents.
Well, if I'm still merged with my parents, I still need something from them, or I haven't taken something. I can't really fully take life from them if I'm still merged, because there's no separation. There's like the energy can't move if we're like one. So there has to be like a space for the energy to move across. So when I fully take my parents, fully take my parents, and I fully separate from them, we're not merged anymore. They're still my parents, and now I can be connected to them. And now they are a resource. They are love. I love them. We have a relationship. It's good or it's bad, whatever. Maybe I'd never seen them before. Maybe I decided that my parents are bad people. I don't want to be around them. But they're still giving life in some way, even after I've separated. Like, I think your parents are always in some way your connection to the life force. But I'm a separate person from them. Now, if your parents are living next door when you're a separate person, and you're not merged with them, then you have the relate. If you like your parents and you get along with them, then you interact with them. And if you hate your parents, you move away. So I think in cultures and the indigenous people, they lived together in groups with the same people for generations, but they were all individuated, living together separately but connected. So I think Stefan Hausner says the longing to belong to our parents, to belong to them, to be merged with them, is the source of most of our illnesses, serious illnesses. So letting go of this belonging to our parents, letting go of this merging, is really the key to being separate and individuating, and then accepting love. I lived with my mother for the last 10 years of her life, and I took care of her, but I was so conscious that she's the mother and I'm the child. She's the big one, I'm the little one, and so I did everything for her. And at the end, I managed all of her affairs. I put her in a home. I took care of her up until the end of her life, but she was the parent and I was the child, and we were separate. And so we had a loving relationship. I took care of her, but I did it as an individual. I mean, maybe not 100% all the time, but primarily I was individuated enough from her. And then I didn't resent it. I just cared for her because I loved my mother. I cared for her because she was my mother, and I respected her and honored her, and she came first, which is a natural order of love, but also because I loved my mother. And I was grateful to her, and she had the best ending that she could have for her. She had a very hard life. It ended pretty well because I didn't take away her agency. A lot of times people, they're taking care of their parents and they make themselves bigger than their parents, which is already messed up, right? And then they take away agency. They make their parent the child. They take away the car keys. They can't drive. They take away their lives, and they're managing their parents' lives is the big one. And that is a violation of the orders of love. That cannot go well. You're going to get resentful. You're going to get angry. It's problematic. You have to help your parents as a child. And if you're individuated from your parents, it's so easy. It's much easier to take care of your elderly parent if you're individuated. And also, that's why it's sometimes easier for the youngest child to take care of the parents. They're the farthest away. So sometimes the youngest child seems farther away from the parents, and they have an easier time taking care of the parents. And the firstborn sometimes is the hardest time if they haven't fully individuated taking care of the parents, because it just feels like they're being pulled in more into their parents, not separated from them. So good for you. I think that's great.
Yeah, and I think it's good for me, and I think it's good for my parents as well. I hope. I hope. And well, maybe we will turn the volume a little bit into the dark side of things for a moment. There's one big topic that I would like to talk to you about, and about the victims and perpetrators, victim-perpetrator dynamics, and shadow work. And you said that you wanted to, that your clients or people you work with do the work themselves, go home and do your work. And for me personally, the most important works that I have done is kind of this, well, Jungians call it shadow work. So getting to know your dark side, your all those things inside you that you have suppressed, all the nasty thoughts, all the aggressive things, sexual desires and other stuff which are not suitable for the, let's say, a civilized person. So can you talk about that a little bit, about this? First, what importance of doing shadow work or understanding your own shadow, then let's go to the victim perpetrator dynamics.
Well, I think some of the shadow work is a lot of our shadows are not our own shadows. So one thing is getting closer to like, what's my shadow stuff and what's like merged stuff from the family system. And I think if you've got a lot of darkness in there, it probably isn't yours. I don't know that your average person has a lot of shadow that's really that horrible. So that's some of the reason people don't look at it, is it's not all there. If you look in there, it's like, oh my God, because it's not yours. So if you actually clean up some of the family constellation stuff, I think it's kind of easy to start to look at your own shadow. So I think you can do that with meditations in the mind. I encourage people to work with the mind. I tend to encourage people to work with internal family systems where they're working with their wounded child parts that often are part of the shadow work. So meditation is a good way. I make suggestions about Jungian stuff. So I think doing the shadow work, sometimes you can do a constellation about the shadow parts as well. So I think it's helpful for people to learn who they are and not be afraid of it. And a lot of the judgments we have about those parts comes from the entanglements in the system. This need, when we're merged with the system, we're very caught up with innocence and guilt. Innocence and guilt is a big part of family constellation work when we're merged. If we're individuated, innocence and guilt doesn't have much power over us. So we can look at our shadow parts without innocence and guilt and just see them and then come in relationship. I think the key about shadow parts is to be in relationship with them. I see you. How are you? What do you need? What are you about? Really to speak and know them. I think that's the key, is if you're in a relationship with yourself and those parts, and I talk to those parts, set them up, set up your aggression. How are you? What do you need? Why did you? Just tell me what your words are. Listening to your aggression. Being in a relationship with your shadow, then it isn't really shadow. It's just like things that are hidden that you don't let them out, but they're there for you. They're resources then. But I think cleaning out the stuff that doesn't belong helpful. I do a regular meditation where I go into my heart chakra, where for me a lot of the shadow stuff is in my heart, and I go in there and I do like some house cleaning. I go in there and I deliberately take things that are shadowy, that don't belong anymore to me, and I throw them out the window. I imagine my heart's up, it's like up on a tall building, and I just throw things out and I sweep and I clean. I have this regular visualization of sitting with, encountering, tossing, sorting, uncluttering the things in my heart that don't belong, or getting to know the parts that do belong and giving them a place. Sometimes I can put those parts on the shelf or give them a room. So these are easy exercises to do, but they're hard to do these exercises if you're still merged with the system, if you're still merged with shadow parts that are not yours. So I think it gets easier after you've done a few family constellations. I think it's easier to do your shadow work, and it gets easier and easier. And I think it's required. You can't have any parts that are hidden like that, because if they're hidden, they feel like they're excluded. So it's similar to the rule in family constellation where the system does not tolerate something that's excluded. Things have to belong. They have to have a place. So all of your shadow parts have to have a place for them to be well.
And so, like Jung would say that if you are not aware of them, they will be projected outwards. And if you do a healing work or a family constellation facilitating, you will project your unconscious stuff there, and it will have an effect. So you cannot, to kind of have to do it.
Yeah, and I think it really, if you're still merged with your parents, right? You're still, they're big and small. You don't have the kind of the power you need to manage your own shadow stuff. So once you're starting to separate from your parents, individuating, it gives you all kinds of power as an individual. But then you take that power as individual, and then you start using it on your own shadow parts, your own work. So there's a way that the parental issue of separating from them opens up your capacity to self-evaluate, to heal, to explore, to really become a self that includes the shadow parts. But it's hard to really do shadow work if you're still merged with your family and merged with your system. I think that's where constellations, even though it's shadow work isn't what we primarily promote, the shadow work really becomes easier once you're separated from the system and your parents in that way, and you're a self who can now. And I have regular, like I say, I have regular things I do to work with the parts of myself. I do all kinds of different things, and I recommend things to my clients that they do their shadow work, and certainly facilitators do. I'll be asking you as a trainee in the training program to do stuff like that. I think it's important because you really want to be as a facilitator. You want to be an individuated self who's facilitating. You don't want to be a person merged with your system facilitating. And this gets back to what we were talking about earlier. Why is people bringing in all kinds of other things? They're bringing all kinds of things that are bigger than them when they're feeling small. So I'm in a constellation and I'm feeling small and helpless. And I don't know the words of love well enough to use them. So I bring in other big things to help me. Shamanism, plant medicine, drums, reptilians. I bring all these other things in that are bigger, because when they're bigger, then I'm safe because there's someone bigger around because I'm small. But if I'm in the constellation and I'm feeling big and individuated and a self, the only person and thing I need is me. I'm the only resource I really need in the constellation in terms of my role as facilitator. Then and I can fully help the client when I'm really there and I'm really an individuated adult. That's the goal, at least.
And I think I would also add one more thing, that maybe this is personal for me more, that doing shadow work kind of is understanding this reality that you are not all good, that you have the perpetrator in you as well. And if you are not able to kind of handle that reality that you are also capable of doing bad things, that's like part of your, I would say, soul, that if you are in the place that everything is good and shiny, that I'm just a pure soul here and just having this experience and all the bad things are outside. And what I see many times, if we're talking about the reptilians and the conspiracy theorists, they are projecting that evil outside themselves, that we are the light workers of the world, we are just here for the healing, but they are the big reptilian aliens or Illuminati or deep state or whatever. That's the evil outside, and we are fighting against that. And then, well, maybe I would say something about, we had the conversation in a Facebook group that somebody said that, well, I'm accounting these reptilians or fighting them in the astral realm or whatever. And I'm just like looking at that text, like that's like perfect description on shadow projection, that I'm not able to look at my shadow, that my evil, that I have this evil inside myself, and then I will project in somewhere. Maybe I do a little bit plant medicine, and then I'm in those astral planes of whatever, that because our mind can create all these worlds of whatever, and then we are like, these are the fact of the situation. Illuminati ruins the world, and we have to fight that. And then I'm like,
no, I think that first of all, constellations teaches us not to judge so severely. Like when we're merged with the family system, we have a very strong sense of guilt and innocence, and good and bad. And when you individuate, you lose that whole innocence guilt thing that a child needs. The child needs that innocent guilt thing because it keeps them from dying. It's part of the shame and guilt and everything. It's all part of surviving. But once you're an adult, you're taking care of yourself. You find others to be resources for you to keep yourself safe. You don't need that. So when you're looking at your shadow parts as an individuated adult, you don't see them the same way. You see them as dear things, sacred things. And also a lot, if you clear a lot of that out, it's not quite as, so some of the darkness and perpetration energy isn't yours. So if you take out everything out, yeah, I have what's left after I've cleared everything out that's not mine. Well, I can be selfish, I can be narcissistic, I can be this or that. Okay, I have that in me. And there's no good, there's no darker, there's no lighter, there's no good or bad, none of these things have to be judged that way. They're just facts. I have this capacity to this, I have this capacity to this. This is just things inside a human being in general. And these are just things in myself. And I can live with them when they're just human. These are just being human. And I think it's hard to see what human is when you're merged with your system, especially if it's got a lot of dark stuff in it. So just being a human being, I'm a human, I'm an individual human. I've got these parts. Hello, parts. How are you? It's a very different experience when you don't judge them. And I think constellations do teach you not to judge what's out there that way, because judging the world from innocence and guilt is a child's way of doing it, who's merged in their system. And that's some of what you're talking about, needing to have reptilians. That's also part of it. I have to be innocent or I'll die. And someone has to be guilty so that I'm good. So that's right away tells me there's magical thinking of a child who's merged right away. That's a definition of anybody who's using that language is probably merged with their system. An individuated adult or a man or a woman, they don't say things that way. They just, because it doesn't make any sense. It's like, no. And I don't think indigenous people judge themselves that way. It's just, this is who I am. And they're good things. You have light and dark sides of it. All those things that are inside of us are helpful for the right circumstance. If I need to be a violent person, it's right there.
Well,
but I also think a lot of that perpetration stuff is not in there. So a lot of that typical shadow about perpetration stuff, I think if you really clear the system and you're in touch with the strength of men, there isn't a lot of perpetration. You want to get back to that topic. Perpetrators are usually, almost every time I run into a perpetrator, they're 5-year-old boys or younger. Perpetrators are almost always small boys who have very disorganized attachment style with their mother, and it's almost always about mom. And I don't think I've run into a single perpetrator in a constellation that wasn't really a little boy trying to be a grotesque monster outside. Almost universally, I have, or a grotesque little girl. They're always very tiny and young. And when I deal with perpetrators, I've never run into an adult perpetrator. I mean, the energy is always tiny and small.
So can you describe a little bit about what it is, the victim perpetrator dynamics? What's the play there? What's happening?
So when somebody's a perpetrator, so they're often a perpetrator, somebody victimized the family. Something bad happened in a system got damaged in some way. They feel powerless, they feel weak, everybody's merged, it's psychotic. Nobody, in a psychotic system like that, people don't get loved. Mothers who are psychotic don't love their children. They don't really see them. So they're inward. So a child is born to a psychotic mother and they're really angry and furious and they hate her and they love her. And maybe they feel in her the rage that she feels. So they feel like if they're rageful and violent the way that she feels, they'll get connected. So the perpetrator is trying to merge with his mother as a child. So he's trying to be like her and she was trying to be like whoever. So you got these generations of people who are rageful, hurting, striking, avoiding. So it comes out and then they start becoming rapists or murderers or cannibals or wherever it is. And they make new victims. And the victim is often, they feel like they've lost their power. They've been overwhelmed. The perpetrator makes them small. And if a victim's in a system that feels merged and childlike, and some bigger person comes over, it's almost like the perpetrator is like some big parent that screwed them. So it's hard to be a victim if you're individuated. You might be harmed if you're individuated. You might be killed if you're individuated, but you won't be a victim if you're individuated. So generally victims are people who are also merged in a system when something bad happens, or they don't have a secure attachment. So you have merged people hurting other merged people, forming these dynamics where you've got a hurt victim and a hurt wounded perpetrator. And they're stuck. And they're stuck in this dynamic where each wants love, each wants to be seen, each wants to be individuated to be healthy. And what we do in constellations is we individuate them. The classic thing in family constellations, the perpetrator must see that the victim suffered. And the victim must see that the perpetrator is guilty. Relationship, individuation of the two. And for the first times in their lives, they maybe see somebody else that's not them. And they see each other. And when they see each other in a constellation, it's a magic thing. Sometimes there's love and connection, or they're able to go to peace. So it's a challenge. It's a hard way that you have to finally become individuated. But that's what happens in constellations. We individuate the perpetrator and the victim from each other. And that allows for some peace. And it's that's pretty universal. I don't see there's a lot of ways you get at it, but almost always the perpetrator and the victim must see each other in some way, and they must have a relationship again. I mean, for the first time, where they see that they see the victim and the perpetrator get to see the dangers of projection, the dangers of merging, the dangers of wanting somebody big to take care of them. All these things that are violation of the orders of love, the victims and the perpetrators know intimately in some way. And in that moment that they see each other, there's like a real understanding of the order of things and what happened, and they individuate, and they almost always go to peace. And like hopefully they would do that in life, not after the horrible things have happened.
Why do you think that? Well, when I'm looking at the world right now, when I'm looking at politics in Finland and politics in your country, and I see a lot of this victim mentality, a lot of this kind of that people are victims of whatever. And of course, I'm not saying that this is not a harsh place, and there's perpetrators as well. But in Finland, well, actually in your country, we are always looking out for the Nazis. That I hope the Nazis are not here, or the neo-Nazis or the extreme right wing in Finland. And I don't remember who said it, that it's like we have a lack of right-wing extremists in Finland, lack of Nazis, because they are always, we are just looking at them, that there's the kind of these victims all over the place just looking for the perpetrators. And well, of course there are extremists there, but they are so small minority. But the big amount of the people there are the victims are there. There's a lots of people who are living through the victimhood. So what do you think about that?
Well, some of it is what we talked about earlier about projection. So they're projecting out, there's some bad dude. So the question is, what are they, why are they projecting, and what are they projecting? So there's another group. So you have victims and perpetrators, and then you have concealers, the ones who conceal. Because of innocence and guilt, innocent people like to conceal things instead of guilty people. So sometimes the victims are actually concealing. They look like victims. They're concealing something that their family did. So their family did something really bad, and then they make themselves victims because they're concealing the fact that they did something bad. So that's sometimes I think it's, so when I see victims, I wonder, what are you concealing? What did you do? And sometimes they did something really bad and they're concealing that. So here in the United States, you got a lot of people who came here, changed their name. So they did something bad thing in France, they did something bad somewhere in and they came here and they changed their name and they pretended they're good people now. Right. But then the tendency probably would be to become victims. That would be probably the tendency, is to be sort of like, oh, bad. So when I see that, I always wonder, like, what? So victims are people. So when the victims are doing that, I wonder, all right, so what did you do? What are you concealing? Because at some point, you let that go. Why are they not letting it go? What did you do? So that's been a big insight lately, is I'm looking for the concealers. So I would wonder, and if I was in your country, like, what are they concealing? What shitty things did they do during World War II that they're ashamed of, or they were weak? I mean, so there's usually some shame, I think, with the victims. They're shameful about something they did or did not do. And rather than confront their shame and go, all right, we screwed up, they're blaming it on some big dude. But it's also, once again, it's some lack of if they were individuated, they wouldn't do that.
Well, at least
yeah, go ahead.
At least in Finland, well, I went to school, 12 years of public school, and they didn't mention once that there were these camps in Russia as well as in Germany. We talk about a lot of what Germans did and all these concentration camps and all the people who died. Not a single thing they mentioned that the Russians did the same and much more. but it's
Right.
that's the shadow of communism around over Finnish landscape or something like that. So that's that's one big thing.
It's never black and white. It's like it's people who are merged and not following orders of light. They make up all kinds of fantasy. They're not looking at their shadow. It's just crazy stuff. People who are individuated and working, and individuated people are like factual. None of this kind of stuff really happens. So it's all like with Jewish people, we always like leave out the fact that Jews collaborated with the Nazis. My dad had my father who was in Dachau. He had a friend also in Dachau who they'd grown up with, and his friend became a capo, a police officer for the Nazis. And so his best friend, one of his best friends from high school, was beating up other Jews. And he ended up living like 3 blocks from our house. My dad had a very conflicted relationship with him because he knew this guy who had collaborated with the Nazis to survive. You never hear anybody talk about that. Everybody's like, or with Africans, who put the black people on the ship? It wasn't white people. Africa had slavery for generations. They actually taught the West a lot about slavery. The African tribes grabbed those people up, handed them over to the white people to put on the ship. Now, of course, the white people were giving money and guns to get but they plugged into an existing slave system. So, but we never hear that. We never hear who put this. So I think, but unconsciously we know that. So unconsciously, I would imagine African Americans know other Africans put them on ships, and they're the real perpetrators. But they're not blaming those Africans. They're blaming people here or people in Finland. They're blaming people for other stuff. So there's a lot of projecting other stuff around. And when you get down to the real facts, it's, as we know in Constellations, the story is never the real story. It's never the real story is always quite different. And you can only find it by stepping into a kind of a certain state of mind. So in Constellations, we go into this phenomenological place where we see in a place of non-judgment, and it's, all of a sudden, like, we become Sherlock Holmes. We can see the facts. So I think here in the U.S. and in Finland, I think it's just all that projection is just hiding something. So what's hiding? So I write little notes all the time. So as soon as I hear a victim, I go, "What are they hiding? What are they? What's being hidden there?" Because every single family on Earth has victims and perpetrators. Every system has it. Everybody's been both. It just that's a fact. So why is it showing up for this family? Why are they so much perpetrators? Why is this other family being victims? So then you get into the particulars. Why are they on that particular side of the fence? Or sometimes you have people who are in both. I have a lot of times I'll have a sister. One sister is connected to the colonial invaders, and other sisters connected to the indigenous people who were invaded. So you have to get into the what's going on, but it's almost always all projection by people who are merged. So you want to. What's my answer to solving the world as a problem? Is individuation. Individuation is the answer to the world right now. That is the epidemic. There's not enough individuated adults on the planet.
Did you know who said the same thing 50 years ago?
No.
Carl Jung. So that was his solution as well. But hey, let's go to my last topic before I run out of mental batteries. And this is the last topic. Topic is that maybe the only thing that, well, I have been doing your workshops, and we are in the same Facebook groups and have these conversations and stuff that, and 99% of, maybe 95% of time I agree with you with many stuff. But there's this one point that I do not see eye to eye with some things with you. And I would like to have a conversation about it. We don't have to have a debate about it, but I would like to bounce these ideas. So you talk about this that we used to have kind of this, I would call it the noble savage idea of that we used to have something good or something rites of passage stuff that help us to heal, or or the cultures helped us to individuate or step into the strength of men more easily. So but for me, when I look at the thing that we did have this kind of rites of passage rituals. But like I was just reading Jung's archetype of collective unconscious, and he has a like perfect description of family constellations. And he went to Africa to these indigenous tribes, and he found these people who like the uncle died, and let's say uncle's name was John, but of course it wasn't John. And they took the newborn child and gave it a name called John, and acted like that it's the guy who just died. And it wasn't like a conscious stuff that they did, like a family constellation kind of, that you were immersed to your uncle, but it was like the whole tribe just decided. And I think that's kind of like, I can see that this kind of, there are these ideas of individuation, ideas of rites of passage in old religions and old ways, but they are not the same. That I don't believe that we used to have it better. I think we have the best time that we have, it's right now. So what do you think about this, or have I misunderstood you somehow?
No, I've run into this before. I think that you'd have to go pretty far back, and it's impossible now to really see what indigenous cultures were like, because most of those indigenous cultures have already been become agricultural, have had contacts with city states. So there are very few native. I don't think you can find, because even the indigenous cultures in like Brazil or Philippines, their lands have been shrunk. So you don't really have. There's no example on the earth now of what indigenous life was like 10,000 years ago. We just don't know. I don't know that it was perfect, but I don't know that you would see some of this, like, you know, what your example. I don't know that you'd see that back there. I think that the tribe naming one kid after the dead uncle, I think you're seeing already signs of the pathology of contact with the West and other, you know, in conquering powers. So I think if you go far, far back enough, you might see something like what you're envisioning that you think would be good today. I don't know for sure. Maybe today is best. It doesn't really matter. To me, it doesn't matter if I go back to those places, because there's, generally speaking, like most social scientists are trying to make normative models out of pathological societies. So all the social science I studied in college, it's about US, and US is a how you can't make any, it's like, this is how a bad society is, so you're going to make a judgment how human beings are. So I prefer going back a little farther back just to see what human beings were like before Westernization, is get some idea what is a human being. So that's why I like to go back, and I don't think all ritual processes are necessarily good, but I think we don't have anything like that today, so we're missing something like that. And if we can make something better, I think that's great. But there is little today that allows us to individuate very easily. And I think if we go far, 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 far back enough, back to pure hunting and gathering time, I think you'd find more family groups and societies that were closer to what you would think would be healthy individuation than we've had over time.
I'm seated more like that. Well, we must have some kind of evolution of consciousness, because we were monkeys before we were humans, and nobody knows what really happened. But one thing that I have learned from family constellations and about this group thinking and group phenomenon, that somebody explained it me this way, that we used to live so close to each other that there wasn't any individuals there. There was just the family. And that's why the exclusion meant death. That if you weren't playing by the rules of the family, you would die. That was the facts of the situation back then, because the environment was so rough. And from that place, that's really easy to see the family constellation working, that if you are there, it's kind of like pre-individuation time, and that's the Jungian point of view that before that there was no individuals, there were only groups and families, and the individuation to becoming yourself is a quite new phenomena. Like maybe there were a couple individuated people in our history, but it's more like 500 years ago. That's like our evolution, our consciousness is now in the place that where we can stand alone, and before that that wasn't a possibility.
I don't know that I agree with that. And there's no way for me to prove it to you because there's nobody here to give you an example. You might be right, but I actually think that 20,000 years ago, there might have been groups of people that were full of individuated selves, maybe a little different than how you're imagining, and I'm imagining individuation, which were a complete adult who were still within a group. They were both self and group at the same time and had a balance of it. And if they were following the orders of love, 20,000 years ago, they're in tune with the orders of love and they're individuals. How are they less evolved than me?
Well, I would agree 100% that they were following the orders of love, but I would say that was like with animals or like with wolf packs, they are following the orders of the wolf pack because it's in their like nervous system. And and of course, I don't know. Oh, that's the same thing. This is just what I think, and it comes from the Jungian lens because I'm so involved in the Jung's thinking. And I like, if you look at the monkeys, they are not individuals. They are just monkeys in the group, and they have their own rules of love in the group, and they are following them blindly because they are not like kind of self-conscious. And from that unself-consciousness, somehow consciousness evolved to be inside of an individual. And
well, what if consciousness, let's say 100,000 years ago, consciousness developed to its highest point, and it's been a descent since.
Yeah, well, that's a possibility. Yeah.
The thing is I don't really care. I mean, I often use this other stuff just to get people to think about what's going on today, but I'm not wedded to the idea that consciousness was equal before or better today. I don't really, to me, that isn't a strong thing that I think about. I want to help each individual that I can individuate now. And I have a tool to do it now. And if Jung is right, that's great. So I often talk about this stuff, and you can disagree with me when I say it, but I don't feel really strongly that that's it. It's just a way for me to get people to think out of the box. I'm more interested that they experience it in a constellation process. And like now is more important than how it was. So whether it was better or whether we're better, I don't really care so much. I do think now, for me, right now, this moment with you is the best time in my life. This is right now in this moment, I am in my best place. And the next moment, and that to me is what constellations teach us, how to live now. Try to live now in the best. So it doesn't matter what happened to me when I was a child. It matters how I am now. So if I needed to, I would totally say, all right, you're right. And it wouldn't be a big deal for me.
Maybe the thing that I'm pointing at is kind of this, maybe it's not about you so much, maybe more other people. There's this kind of having this fantasy of that things used to be better in the olden times. There was this beautiful, there's kind of this magical, we were part of the natures, betting wolves and sleeping with the bears, and that's
it's an innocent it's a projection of innocence backwards. Or the idea here in the United States that the American Indians were like innocent, like noble savages, and they were perfect, and everything they did was perfect. And we came along, big bad white people came here, and we fucked everything up, and they were perfectly and wonderful. And then we came. That makes them children. They were human beings. They had good and bad, and they killed each other, and they had war, and they scalped each other's heads, and they were human beings. This is another way. Those kinds of backward innocence thing is another form of merging. People who are individuated and really able to understand the orders of love don't project that onto the past. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but I love that backward innocence. That's like perfect, because maybe that's what I'm pointing at. What's like bothering me. when people do this kind of thing.
Oh,
And
it bothers me all the time too. Oh my God, yeah.
And I do, of course, know that we have a lots of things we have lost in the past, and we have lots of things we should learn. And for me, doing men's work, the number one thing that we don't have the rites of passage system for individuating boy to men. That's like for me, what I see, that's like the biggest hole in this world, one of the biggest holes in men's world right now, that we don't have these rites of passage when we are stepping out from the boy world to be a man.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so I referenced the past. I don't know. It only matters that we come up with a rite of passage for us now, and that it's good for us now, and that it serves us now. And it doesn't matter whether it was better or worse before, really, just as long as it's good now. I think this comparison making the past, but I think it doesn't matter whether the past was better or worse, because we're here now. That to me is another kind of false thing. Like, were we more evolved before? Yeah, were people more evolved or more innocent? It only matters where we are now. So are we the most evolved? Right now we are. I mean, then let's be, you know what I mean? It just matters where we are now. And so I don't get too caught up in this idea. Have we evolved to greater consciousness? Maybe. Is it automatic? No, it's just like, I see a lot of people who, they talk about this current evolving consciousness, and there's spiritual bypassing left and right.
Yeah, well,
right?
that's like that's big,
which is really a problem.
Well.
It's just like, so it's like, oh, we're gonna have, it's all gonna be better now. Well, how's that gonna happen? Well, we're just gonna fantasize a lot. And it's like, well, okay, what's that world look like? Who's taking out the trash? I mean, I always point out like the Dalai Lama, great guy, right? He's got an army of slaves basically to take care of him, and he's a dictator autocrat. Nice guy, I'm guessing, but he's got a whole army of people who are just devoted to his care. He doesn't take out the trash. If I was a Dalai Lama, I'd take out the trash. I wouldn't have an army of people. I'd just be the Dalai Lama, and I'd be living in Brooklyn, New York, in some little apartment, and I'd be the Dalai Lama. I wouldn't have anybody taking care of me. I'd still have to work, and why does the Dalai Lama have to not work? I'll be the Dalai Lama. I work on the subway. I'm the Dalai Lama. Every once in a while, people come to my apartment, and I tell them wise things, and I'm holding the energy of the space. But the Dalai Lama is another big dude, and he's got an army of functionally slaves taking care of him. But that's spirituality. I don't think I need that.
Well, I think that's the perfect place us to stop with a little bit bashing of Dalai Lama. In the end, it keeps us humble.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, hey, it was really great talking with you, and we covered almost all the topics I wanted to talk to you about.
Oh, good.
Maybe we lost a couple, but it doesn't matter. But this was really good. But if somebody is now interested on your work, where could they find you?
You mean if they didn't want to work with you?
No, your work.
I have a website, healingbodytherapeutics.com. And someone's calling me, and I'm turning off the phone. So I have a website. Sorry, I got a phone call in the middle of this. I didn't turn off my phone. Healingbodytherapeutics.com. Or if you're on Facebook, you can go to Family Constellations Chicago, and I'm on Facebook. And you can also email me at Barry Krost, BarryKrost @mac.com, and you can talk to me.
And I will put those in the description of the podcast as well.
Well, I didn't need to say them then.
Yeah, as well. So, but hey, thank you a lot, and let's
do it again
later.
Let's do another podcast.
We will. Let's do another podcast.
Hey, if you're listening to this call, listen to this podcast, and you want to have us talk again, let him know, and we'll do it again.
Yeah, please. And if you want Barry to answer more questions about family constellations or whatever is happening here, please ask those questions, and we can put them on the next podcast.
Yeah, and if I'm not available and you need to work with somebody, here's another person to think about.
Okay. So, hey, thank you, and see you later.